Morning, students. Today we are going to start a new topic. Already, I have given a introduction. Geological data collection. Today, our main focus is what are the geological data, what for the slope and how we collect, and then after collection, how to systemize those data so that you can use these
Sir,
data for please.
sir, your sound is not coming clearly, sir. Can you, sir, please use a headphone or earphone? I think now that can help us.
It's audible now.
Yes, sir. It's audible.
So today we will discuss geological data collection. So in that part, we will try to understand what are the geological data we required for slope stability investigation. What are the method we will follow to collect those data, and what are the systems we will follow to collect those data, and how to interpret those data after collections. In today's lecture, we have briefly subdivided the lecture into 5 parts: the direct shear test, second, the preliminary slope stability investigation, then detailed slope stability investigation, and procedure for geological data collection, and the last is hemispherical projection technique. Though we will deal one full class in detail later part of our lecture on hemispherical projection system, that is true. So, what is direct shear test? You all are aware that in slope stability investigation, the major parameter that is required to be estimated from the field sample is the shear characteristics of the geometry. There are many methods by which, by employing that method, we can determine the shear strength of the geometry. But out of all these techniques available with us, direct shear test method gives us a very easiest method to determine the characteristics of C and phi, cohesion and the friction. The simplicity of this method is the machine is not very heavyweight. For the small one I am talking about, though for the bigger one there are other. You can carry this setup to the field. You can carry out the test in the field sample, and particularly for the aggregate rock samples, loose rock samples, we do not have to adhere to the sample preparations techniques. So with that in situ material sample, we can directly test the direct shear against one block against the other. If in between these two blocks, the material is there, so if I push the upper part, upper platen, so the lower platen will be fixed. So in between this interface of these two planes, I can determine the shear strength characteristics. So what we do in the field sample, we place the discontinuity plane along this line so that I can specifically determine the shear strength characteristics of those discontinuities. That is our prime objective. So this is basically a schematic diagram of this method is like this. There are two setup. The top setup, on the top setup where we apply the normal load vertically downward perpendicularly. On the lower platen, So the both box we have the sample. The lower platen is fixed on a roller boundary. Means we can apply horizontal motion along the lower boundary. So if a sample, two sample fixed, now I with this horizontal platen, this is fixed. Then on the left side, pressure is applied. So there is a twisting. Due to this twisting, a shear force will generate in this interface. This shear force will generate in the interface. So we are directly estimating that shear force. That shear force we are directly determining. That is why it is called direct shear test. But how we can interpret that data? We will interpret that up to which the sample able to take the load, able to resist the shear force. So similarly, this same result can be interpreted like other elastic strength determination of a sample. We plot stress versus strain. Here we will plot shear stress versus displacement. So from the test, directly we can plot the shear stress on the y-axis and the displacement along the x-axis. This displacement is basically in the platen the horizontal displacement. If the sample is L length and the displacement we allow the del L amount of displacement we allow, that after which we will not take any result. So there is a percentage. What would be the del L amount? So up to that we will take the data, and up to that del L amount of displacement, what is the peak load taken by that particular sample? That is psi p. That is a peak load taken by the sample. That is the peak shear strain of that particular load. So we can plot that particular data in this fashion in the figure B I have shown. Is it understandable? It is clear? Anybody have any question regarding this?
Sir, sir,
Please?
I not understood, sir.
Huh?
I have not understood, sir.
Not understood. Yes, that is the reason. I am telling that when in between these two samples, okay, this sample is fixed. Now I am applying a horizontal force along this direction. Okay, and there is a constant normal load applied, that is sigma n, constant normal load. You can see in the last figure, constant normal load is applied. So under constant normal load, that constant normal load represents the overburden pressure on which the sample is undergoing. So under that constant normal load, now I am applying horizontal force. Due to this horizontal force, the horizontal platen will move on the left side. So due to this movement, there will be a shear force generated in this interface between the top part of the sample and the bottom part of the sample. So if I have the setup ready to determine this force, estimate this force, we can plot this force versus deformation in this particular graph B. Is it understood?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that is. In the earlier, what we have done in the engineering mechanics lab, we have applied vertical load. We are measuring the amount of strain developed. Okay, then we have plot that result on y-axis on the stress, and the x-axis the strain, and that is the stress versus strain diagram. And we determine the Young's modulus, the gradient of that particular line. Here, the same kind of plot we can do measuring that shear stress developed and the amount del L I measure, because this del L very easy to determine because it is visible. And using the caliper and using the scale, we can determine how much amount this lower platen, horizontal platen has moved on the left side. We can determine this del L amount. So, displacement versus shear stress plot can be done from this particular test setup. So, there are number of ways to represent that particular data. The del psi p, that is the peak shear stress. We can also get a different kind of peak under different normal load. You can see we have applied the normal load on the upper platen perpendicularly, vertically. So the normal pressure acts perpendicular to this shear force. Okay. So this normal load represents the amount of overburden pressure the sample is undergoing in the particular field condition. Suppose you have collected the sample as 50 meter depth. What would be the overburden pressure? 50 into rho r rock unit weight. If unit weight is 20 kilonewton per meter cube, 22 into 50 meter, that would be around 1100 kilopascal. So that is 11 kp amount of load. Not 11, 1.1 kilopascal. So this way we can interpret the direct shear and we can conduct the direct shear test. So this point is clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, if we observe that, suppose at normal stress 1, sigma 1, normal stress sigma 2, normal stress sigma 3, normal stress sigma, so this way you have conducted the test, so you will get a number of curves like this. You have the test 1, test 2, test 3, like that. So the lowest amount of the shear strength we have found out that is the residual part of that particular material. There is some amount of residual part present in the shear in the sample, and there is a peak load it can take. So this way we can interpret the result. So in that understanding, though, we will conduct direct shear test in the laboratory, that we will understand in better terms in future. So that we will do when we will elaborate in the laboratory how we are doing this. We will deal with that particular aspect in detail. Now, this one aspect is, now we have understood that from the direct shear test, we can estimate and we can collect the data about the shear strength characteristics of the geometry. Is clear?
Yes, sir.
Now, after understanding this particular aspect, now we can focus on primary slope stability investigation. So this is basically the first step of my whole investigation of the slope stability. In the preliminary stage, what we will do? We will try to understand on what rock type we are working. Whether this is a purely a rock or there is an admixture of rock and soil and both. Particularly when we try to deal with the overburden part in the mine. So in the overburden, we will often see that there is a mixture between soil and rock, and up to 10 meter, 15 meter, often we observe there is a layer of soil. After that, there is a different rock layers. So those aspects we have to consider what type of material we are working with. So these are the things we should observe, we should judge, then we should record. So in this all part, these three part is very important. Observe, then decide or estimate, then record. So these three will be integrated in all the process. We will try to understand what type of rock we are dealing with. Then second, we try to observe and try to find out. We will search what type of geological discontinuity or what type of geological structural geology being observed in the particular. Whether there is a predominant amount of joints, or there are n number of folds observed, or there are dikes, or there are faults, or geological stratification, bedded deposit being observed, or there are schist structure, schistosity in different planes. We have to map that. How to map that? That we will discuss in detail in institutional projection system. So, using geological compass and using the engineering judgment, we can measure those parameters, particularly the orientations, persistence, spacing, and the influence. That we will discuss in the later part. We'll try to gather the hydrological data. Hydrological data is very, very important. Means you have to estimate how much amount of water percolates daily, hourly basis in that particular slope. Then you have to pinpoint what are the particular source of those water stream, whether the source is very far away or whether the source is very near, or there is a possibility that in some point of time, if the slope is advanced, then we may intersect that particular water table. So we have to gather those hydrological data. So based on that estimate, we can possibly understand the mode of shear failure going to be occur in that particular zone. That we have already understood in the last class. For the planar failure, how the failure will occur, what type of geological condition will drive the planar failure, what type of condition will drive for wedge failure, what type of condition will drive for a toppling failure, what type of condition will drive for a circular failure. So based on this preliminary understanding and gathering of the data, we can interpret possibly, most probably, the possible failure mode and the location of zones of susceptible failure, where from the failure will occur. And also we can, by surveying that particular slope, we can determine the overall slope angle. And based on that particular aspect, we can do the feasibility study. So we can undergo, we can proceed this operation and the possible water problem. If the water flow is very high, then we have to understand what are the pore pressure going to be developed at that particular point, that particular slope. Due to the development of the pore pressure, what would be the reduction of the shear strength of that particular slope mass, and how this pore water pressure, that's because the pore water pressure is a buoyancy force. So that pore water pressure will give a uplift force on the slope. So due to this upliftment, overall the normal stress acting on that particular slope due to the self weight will be reduced. And due to that, slope will be susceptible to that we will discuss. Now, I will show you a few snaps. That will give you the picture how the slope failure is going to occur on a different geological condition. This is a civil site of a failure, wedge failure occurred for a continuous bedding plains in North Carolina in America. This is a failure occur in a slope on a highway terrain in British Columbia, Canada. Though the rock is a blocky and very strong, but due to the heavy rainfall, suddenly there are failure occurs. This particular slope, if you observe, the bedding is oriented parallel to the slope face, bedding aligned parallel to the slope face. So advantage of this particular slope is, right now this slope is stable at a 75-degree angle. But if there are some amount of other external loading condition or there are some of the other external disturbance, this failure may occur along this bedding plane, and that one after another bedding plane will slide under planar failure. So this particular slope is under a susceptible condition. From this picture, you can understand that there are two opposite directional joint was there, and they intersected in this particular line of intersection, and due to that intersection a wedge formed, and some point of time along this line of intersection the resisting shear force was not sufficient to retain that particular wedge. Due to that, wedge failed and slided along that particular line of intersection. And now we observe the failed wedge failure. That particular. So under these conditions, we observe that often this preliminary investigation is not sufficient to eliminate future slope failure. So we need a detailed slope stability investigation. In this detailed slope stability investigation, we will subdivide the work into two parts. One aspect is the field work that we will conduct and carry out in the field, and another part we will conduct in our laboratory, in our office. Particularly, we are dealing with the laboratory and the simulations lab. So first part in the field work that we will do, we will first visit the site. That is, in opening the survey term we call reconnaissance survey. We will visit the site. After visiting the site, we will collect and compile all the topographic maps. One after another, all the graph maps will be merged on a one map, so that we can understand what are the features here in the surrounding. Then all the data that we have observed, geological feature, will be mapped in a scale of 1:1000 or 1:500. So the detailed things you can observe. We will mark the boundary of different features we observe. We will also map the structural features using the geological compass. Okay, that's how to operate the geological compass we will discuss. So in the field work, we will collect all the field data, that is structural geological data. We will compile all the geological data into one map in 1:1000 or 1:500 scale. Here, after doing this, we will also collect the groundwater data. Groundwater data in the sense, we will collect what is the amount of percolations observed hourly, daily, weekly, monthly. If the site is very sensitive, then we will observe continuously. If the site is not very sensitive, sometimes we will collect the data and we will check our assessment whether the groundwater condition is good or not, or it is bad. Based on that, confidence will again plan it. After that, we will collect samples. Older samples we can collect directly, or if facility available in our lab, from the boulder sample we can prepare the core sample. That we will show you in the laboratory how to do the coring from a block of rock. That facility we have. What else? if you want to collect the sample of a few meter depth, 20 meter, 30 meter, 50 meter depth, from that collecting chunk of rock, it is impossible. So for that, you have to plan a core drilling program in that particular. So here we have mentioned the core recovery should be at least 90%. So based on that, we will collect the from the drilling program. We can also assess something about the particular data. And if feasible, if instrument is available with you, then we can also study the geophysical properties in and around the geophysical prospecting. We can also understand the far away source of water. We can also understand the discontinuity in that particular deposit up to a certain limit. So these are the advantage of the geophysical studies, but due to the cost, many of the studies or in investigations we do not proceed in that particular direction. In the office and laboratory work, after doing all these things, you have come in the laboratory with the sample you have collected in the field. You have come up with the different maps you have collected. You have already measured different structural geology observed in that particular field. Then you have to plot all these things in the laboratory in one single map analysis. So here we can develop the radial open pit working section. So from that particular figure, you can determine the 2D XY plot, height versus width of the particular bench. You can also evaluate the discontinuity concentrations. Okay, that will show you how to show that by plotting the great circle and their pole, the concentration of pole, and from that pole we will plot the contour of the poles, so you can understand what is the intensity of those geological features in the site. In the laboratory, we will conduct the laboratory test for the intact rock first. In the intact rock, we will conduct the initial load test to determine the compressive state. You will also determine the triaxial under triaxial load, and also we can use the direct shear test apparatus that I have already discussed. But if we have geological discontinuity in the particular sample, then we have to test the direct shear. So we have to place that geological discontinuity in between two plateaus so that we can estimate the shear strength characteristics of that discontinuity. So preparation of that sample is very important. Here you require the engineering judgment, how to cut the sample, how to place the geological discontinuity in the middle so that you can put that sample in the shear box and you can exactly determine the shear strength characteristics along that discontinuity. Here I want to.
Sir, if we place a sample, if we prepared a sample and placed in the direct shear machine, if there are 2 or 3 discontinuities, is there any issue?
If there are
2 or 3 discontinuity planes,
yes,
in the sample,
okay,
then it will affect our values or readings.
yes, very good question. Very good question. Thank you. Regarding your question, the answer is we cannot accommodate more than one discontinuity plane in the particular sample while we will conduct the test of direct shear to determine the shear strength characteristics of that particular plane. Now you may question, sir, I observed 2-3 different kind of joints or orientation in the particular plane. So the answer is you collect different sample for those geological discontinuity. So for a geological discontinuity type 1, you will collect many samples, 10 number of samples. You will test that 10 number of sample for determining the joint shear strength of the joint set 1. You will collect n number of samples for the joint set 2. So in these samples, joint set 2 will be there, and you will test in the direct shear test apparatus. Then you will determine and estimate the joint strength characteristics of the joint set 2. Similarly for the third, similarly for the fourth. In that way, we can plan the testing of the discontinuity surface samples. Is it understood?
Yes, sir.
But a third option may also arise. Third option is you could not collect, or there is a physical limitation that exactly reproducing that particular sample from that particular field and testing in the laboratory may be not feasible, maybe due to n number of difficulties. What we do in that case? We will synthetically prepare a sample. We'll prepare a sample synthetically, artificially. So this kind of rock type 1 observed on the top of the joint set 1. Rock type 2 is observed on the joint set 1 in the bottom. So we will collect rock type 1 and rock type 2 in the field, but exactly not the joint. Then we will reproduce a artificial joint kind of material, or the rupture or texture observed in the joint set. So we will artificially produce the rupture and the curviness, waviness of the joint set structure in this sample as well as in this sample, and then we put up together this sample, and then we will test this homogeneous, not a homogeneous but a uniform one sample in the direct shear test, and find out the shear strength of the joint set 1. Sometimes also it is not possible to get this rock type 1 and rock type 2 from the field. So what we do in the laboratory, we fabricate using some physical model, cement, grain and other rock type mixture. So you will reproduce synthetically rock type 1, rock type 2 and the waviness artificially. Then we test. Then we will try to interpolate. So these are the possibilities. If you have interest in the research field, you will explore. These are the possibilities. One of the famous experiments being conducted by Barton. They have studied, they have advanced this particular aspect using these test procedures. Though today's term, these processes have been advanced a lot. Now, after up to this point is clear?
Yes, sir.
Now, after doing all these things, we will evaluate the stability sector by sector. We have already explained you the concept of sector. In a total mine field, if you have 6 different zones you have observed with 6 different type of rock properties, so you will subdivide these 6 zones into approximate 6 sectors. So you will determine the stability of sector 1, sector 2. You also have to assess the seismicity of the region. You can easily nowadays you can obtain from the plot we have from the Geological Survey of India data. That map is already available, and the area coming under which zone, zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, like that. From that you can determine the seismicity. Now, after determining based on the data, if the factor of safety is, suppose for a case, less than 1. Sometimes you have observed less than 1. Sometimes it is pretty close to 1, maybe greater than 1, but it is not more than 1.05 or 1.1. So in this second stage, it is a very critical one. In this second stage, you have to assess the risk of failure. Of course, I may allow that, okay, the factor of safety is 1.1. Okay, it's continue. Let me continue this factor of safety with this only. But in addition to that, you have to assess that if there is a failure occurs, what will be the consequences? What will be the consequences? If the consequences is very high, then definitely your risk is also very high. So if that is the situation, then you have to flatten the slope. You cannot go with 1.1 factor safety or 1 factor safety. If flattening of the slope is not possible, then you have to use the artificial support. We use Gabon walls. We also give a higher amount of barm width to accommodate the local failure. We also go for draining the slope. Means we try to hole a few number of holes in the slope and fitting a pipe so that if there is a possibility of percolation of water, that water will continuously will be out and the slope will be maintained dry. We will drain the slope. So in this way, we can enhance the stability of that particular slope. So this part is now clear. Up to this investigation, preliminary investigation and the detailed investigation is clear.
Yes, sir.
Now, in this particular aspect, we have to learn what are the procedure we will follow to collect the geological data. In this particular aspect, yesterday I have shown you a figure, figure number 5. If you remember that in between two layers of rock, in the middle, due to the weathering, rock has been eroded. Due to the erosion and the weathering of that particular rock media, the top portion of the rock is now in a hanging position. Can you remember that?
Yes, sir.
So,
Yes, sir.
indicates that weathering plays a very important role and you have to take account of that process in your analysis. So whether due to the weathering the change has been observed in that particular rock, you can do using hammer test. You can also, if you are an expert geologist, you can also estimate using your eye whether the rock has undergone weathering or not. You have to also determine the differences of sedimentation, grain size distributions. Whether the grain size distribution, boulder size in the bottom and the middle, then find like that sedimentation is there observed. You can easily observe that the sedimentation, long sedimentation process. And you have to assess the geological discontinuity pattern, whether somewhere it is very intense, somewhere it is low, somewhere it is medium. So slightly accordingly you can plan, okay, this place is very sensitive, very high intense geological discontinuity observed. Here it is medium, here it is scarce, here and there are discontinuity. So this discontinuity plane is not going to play a very important role. For this one, this highly concentrated geological discontinuity observed, you have to give fast focus in this particular site. Now, after assessing all this, now you have to pinpoint which kind of geological structure you have observed, whether it is a fold structure, you know, this kind of fold structure you observe, and this fold structure is basically a product of million years of transformation of the rock. If there are 3-4 papers you can observe, sedimentation you observe. If there are differences of stress developed, so there is a possibility of generation of fold. This process you already know. If there are different stress developed, different kind of stress develop in these two directions, there is a possibility that the plane is upward, plane may be downward, and this upward point, you can easily understand there is a higher concentration of stress and strain in this particular peak. Is it understandable?
Yes, sir.
Yes. In the fold, in this left axis and the right axis, the stress content concentration, if you measure, the stress concentration in the peak, in the valley and the peak will be most higher. So that is why whether your particular excavation or cut is intersecting this particular position or not, you have to determine. That is why the importance of the fold is. The fold, there are different kind of stress orientation. Those who have understood the great length of the geology, they can also understand from the fold structure the distribution of the principal stresses, sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma 3. You can browse the video, or I will give you that particular reference link. By studying that, you can also understand, by observing this fold, you can determine the orientation of the principal stress sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma. That would be very helpful for designing the slope in this particular fold structure. There are other structures like fault and faulting system. Different faults are observed in different position. So whether the fault is only singular one or a multiple fault is observed, that you have to look at. Then the bedding that you have observed, you have to note. Then the schisto structure in that particular rock, or cleavage structure being observed in that particular rock. Note it. The lastly, you have to map the discontinuities, joints, shear zone, and the bedding. So in the discontinuities, you know, for a discontinuity, it has orientations of deep and deep direction. How to determine that, I will give you. Then after knowing that there are different discontinuities, then you have to map all these discontinuities on a single. So here you have to locate the location. Here location A, location B, location C, like that you have to pinpoint. Okay. Then you have to understand which kind of country rock is observed. On which country rock this geological discontinuity is observed. What is the host rock? The host rock is competent or not? And the type of discontinuity, whether it is a fault or whether it is a discontinuity plane or only joint. After knowing that it is a geo joint, you have to measure the deep and deep direction, or deep and strike. What is deep and strike? You already know. So, suppose this is a plane. This is a plane. This is a plane you observe. This is the dipping side. It's perpendicular to deep. This position, this particular outcrop, this particular outcrop intersecting the horizontal surface, this is the strike. And this perpendicular line is the dipping along this particular line. So this particular line, if you project upward, imaginary, this particular line making an angle with the true north is the bearing or azimuth or a deep direction. Similarly, this strike is also making a direction with the true north. So the difference between the strike direction and the deep direction is 90 degrees. Because these two are mutually perpendicular. Is understood? Is it clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now, I have already told you that to do all these things, you have to systematically prepare a chart. Suppose you are the expert. You know what are the data you require. It is not often possible that you will conduct all the data in yourself. You have to work with a team. So to guide the team, you need to have a template, a system. Yes, if they do not know, but they have to collect all these data, data 1, data 2, data 3, data 4, all the data and their descriptions. So you can prepare this kind of discontinuity survey data, applying your own judgment based on the complexities observed in that particular. This is one type of template. For your side, this template may differ somewhat, but there should be a template of systematic data collection. And if you follow this systematic data collection, only then you can pinpoint whether you have missed one data or whether data is sufficient. So a systematic data collection program should be followed with a template. This is one typical example. Now, often we observe that in this particular surface, there are stray presence of discontinuity. Okay? Discontinuity is starting from this place to that place, and this is the length. Or maybe the orientation of the discontinuity is inside the slope surface. See, if the discontinuity pattern is inside the slope surface, then determining the extent of the discontinuity is very difficult. So the length of the discontinuity plane we map, that is the persistence. The total length of the discontinuity is the persistence. Suppose joint set 1, this is the length L. So you can see that L length is maintained. Or joint set L, joint set 1, this is the persistent L. But it is not often possible that all the joint is exposed to the surface. May not be. So for that case, you have to think about other way to determine the extent of the particular. So you have to determine the coefficient of the continuity of the joint. There are different methods that I will discuss. Then joint intensity. Number of joint set observed per distance, unit distance in the normal of the strike set. And degree of separations. The particular joint set. Whether the joints are pretty close to each other, If the openness is negligible, you cannot observe whether which kind of discontinuity infilling material is there or not, or whether it's a plain and very smooth, or whether this discontinuity is open. If there is an open, there is a possibility that this open particular part is filled with infilling material or gauge material. So that we have to. If there is a gauge material, then you have to collect that gauge material and you have to test in the laboratory what is the amount of shear resistance offered by that particular gauge material. The fourth is you have to determine the waviness of the joint set and the roughness, because the scale we have right now we use throughout the globe. The 10 scale is available from the big Barton diagram, diagram 1, diagram 2, like that. And based on if you have the data set 1, joint set 1, then you will try to match which out of 10 scale it is matching, then you will put that coefficient. So determining the waviness is one kind of estimation of the joint top strength. Nowadays, image processing techniques are widely used for this particular aspect of the joint strength determination. And the next one is conduct the sampling program. Obtain the sample out. It is no joint is observed. An interlock sample is sufficient. If there is a joint plane, that you have already one of your question rightly. If there are multiple joint set observed, then the sampling program should come from all those joint sets, so that your joint set should be representative of all the joint sets present in the field. That you have to take care of. And if there is infilling material, then you have to collect separately infilling material and you have to test in the laboratory what is the shear strength property of that particular infilling material or gauge material present in the joint set. Now, in the later part, you have to determine the groundwater condition. One of the easiest way to determine the groundwater condition is you have to determine the discharge amount per day. If it is the discharge amount is more, you have to measure per hourly basis what is the amount of discharge. And along with that, you know, this discharge is related to the permeability of that particular rock mass or rock. Then you have to determine the permeability or hydraulic coefficient of that particular rock. And if the site is very sensitive, you can plan the measurement twice, thrice like that. Up to this point is clear?
Yes, sir.
So,
Sir, I have a
Sir,
question.
we have a next class, sir.
we have a
I have a doubt.
Sir,
please tell your doubt.
Sir, you saying that we have to collect, we have to take a whole permeability. But in this case, which permeability I will take? It's horizontal or it's vertical or it's overall?
Yes, very good question. Very good question. In the first class, I told you the rock we are dealing with, it is not homogeneous. It's heterogeneous.
Yes,
The
sir.
rock we are dealing with is not isotropic, it is anisotropic. So when I am telling you that rock is anisotropic, it is understood that the response along x-axis, response along y-axis, and the response along z-axis is not one and equal. So whenever you will collect sample, you have to determine horizontal permeability as well as the vertical permeability if you observe that rock is heterogeneous. And you know there are two methods, laboratory test, the result will be available. That is, one is under constant head test, under varying head test, you can determine the permeability. One interesting result I will share you. I don't have, but I will show you later. We have fabricated during my postdoc this setup that under a zero head practically. So there is no water head, the sample height and the water height is more or less same. Then interesting fact is observed, even then there is a flow of the water in the sample slowly and slowly. That is due to the suction pressure present in the rock. That is a different perspective, but due to that there is also permeability. That is a very complex research topic nowadays that we, if you are interested in detail, I will show you those data. Means I am telling you that sample is kept horizontal. There is no head of the water, visible head, difference between the sample and the water. But water is being placed the same data with the sample, and slowly we observe. And if there is a high speed camera, level, not high speed, slow camera, we will study slowly and slowly the percolation along that particular length. If the setup is transparent, our setup was transparent, you can see how the water is percolated along that. So we have tried this particular test on a soil, not on rock. So there are many aspects. We have to determine the horizontal permeability, vertical permeability. Okay, it is clear?
Yes, sir.
Any other question?
No, sir.
Should we proceed?
Yes, sir.
Now, after all these things, you already understood that there is a need. There is a need of plotting the geological discontinuity data on a plane graph.
Sorry to disturb you. Next class, professor is waiting in the classroom.
Okay. Okay. 1 minute. All are present today? Sorry.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Please, what is the date? 9.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we will meet at 3 p.m. today. Okay.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.